What you are about to watch is for entertainment purposes only and does not constitute any type of advice. Always question the validity of what you see and what you hear. Viewer discretion is advised.
Today in Tyranny to 10, we're going to learn something essential because it will help you realize that it is not only you who holds an agenda of power. It is not only you, your allies and your enemies in your nation who got skin in the game. The game goes much farther. It operates worldwide. But before we go into details, let's talk about our program, Freedom 320. This program not only covers the awareness level of how freedom works, like we covered here. We cover a much more applicable approach. This channel is a great if you got influences of power and your bloodline has got a name in the royalty already. However, if you're someone who is or has earned an intellectual awakening and you have decided you want to earn some level of power, then Freedom 320 is for you because it will make suggestions on how to level up. People mistake and think that power is evil or corrupt. That is a mistake that can cost you opportunities. The word power simply means ability to do. Someone who knows how to get access to education at a much more reduced cost and without student loans is able to make higher earnings than someone who's unaware of the process. Someone who's able to lead a team or start a non-profit and get funding is able to earn much more than someone who has no clue where to even find a job. Someone who understands relationships, its advantages, and its boundaries can steer away from lawsuits such as divorce, where all that was earned during the marriage can be lost. Someone who doesn't learn from their mistakes is at a much greater disadvantage than someone who understands their weak points, turns their weaknesses into strengths, and does not repeat the same mistakes is at a greater power than someone who makes the same mistakes over and over. Someone who learns from mistakes of others is at an even greater advantage. Freedom 320 helps you become aware of what, why, and the how in regards to power. There is work to be done and no guarantees, because it is on you to take action. The approach of Freedom 320 goes into a far safer means and the intentions are neutral, meaning that you don't have to be a tyrant to learn how to excel in life. If you are a decent person, you will likely benefit more because we aim to teach you not to burn bridges and to guard your reputation, because when you begin to earn power, you want your word to be like gold. So when others hear you say something, they will know you mean it and you will follow through. It will teach you how to set yourself apart, but only if you enroll and only if you take action. The greatest opportunities are those like this one that don't make any promises. This is how you under-promise and over-deliver. There are courses that have guarantees and then you try to get your money back and they put all the conditions in the world to not refund you, or they take their side down. We don't do any of that. We offer no money back because we know that what we offer stands for itself. Freedom 320 is not even a course in itself, but actually a membership to our nonprofit and an opportunity to help us expand. Who knows? We may end up working together in the future. Let that be a hint for what may be coming your way. We are now establishing ourselves because our sponsors are working with us more and more for an alliance. The program is incredible and they are looking for new ways to bring intellectual and spiritual awakening. We've had an opportunity to work with them, and what they have shown us has led us to a level of knowledge where we are today. We just never thought that they would become our sponsors. I have no word to describe their guidance. It is like a mentorship, but much more powerful. They are not coaches or anything that just anyone can become. They hold several state licenses, so unlike fake gurus, they plan to stay in business and provide actual value to their students. Check them out in the description. Now back to our topic for today. One important thing for you to remember when you rise up in power is that the world is a big place. Your country is not the only one, and if you go back to the very beginning of power, we know that a powerful empire always strives to conquer another empire. The only thing that may keep it from doing that would be other empires getting involved or not being certain whether they can actually conquer that empire. It has been proven that underestimating an opponent can mean not only the opponent winning, but also the acquisition of your belonging. Even today, in a civilized world, it can still be witnessed in lawsuits. It is just not as prevalent because of treaties in order to keep peace, but it really isn't about peace. It's rather the realization that power has become so strong and concentrated that one nation can have enough power to disintegrate the entire planet. However, such diplomacy must be buried under the illusion that we do it because we have become kind and humane individuals. The reason that this excuse is used is because there is public awareness. The aim is to keep the public away from the true nature of the operation of tyrannical power. The two reasons are so that the public remains obedient and thinks that we offer freedom, and so that the public does not start to desire to get some of that power for themselves. In this game, the less competition, the better. With a growing population, power can expand to near infinity, but if the population becomes aware, then the rules of the game could be shifted and you and others like you could be left out of it. This is nothing new. This is why kings made up the idea that their power came from God. The church knew the scheme and were in on it. That's why the church was usually the left hand of the king conquering through indoctrination, and then the knight warriors conquering through force. It did not take long before kings realized that conquering through indoctrination was much more powerful, less tiring, and more manageable than using force. This is why it did not take long at all for the church to take over the teaching. This is why the first medical schools and prestigious places of education were run by the church. The students were not only pledging to the honors of the king, but also to the church, and by mixing faith and education, an agenda could be easily run. If there was an illusion that there was a separation of church and government, that was even better. The truth is that for the longest time, they were both hand in hand when it came to appraising and running power. The norm will become going to earn all the skills necessary, attend church on Sundays, and then get married and raise the children with the same principles. You may be scratching your head and wondering, what's so bad about that? It doesn't sound bad at all. It sounds so much like some nationalist patriotic dream where having a family, living in a safe space, and then retire from a job that has appreciated all the best years. The reality is that it is not bad at all. Anyone, especially now, would do anything for that type of life. You may be wondering, then why has it changed so much? You must realize that power has a tendency to experiment for its own paths of advancement. Yes, the life is great and it could have stayed that way, but you must look at it in the idea that benefits the expansion of power. What type of person is likely to fit its maximum output to the beast of power and get as little as possible? A man or a woman who understands the dynamics of life and the economical structures around it, or someone in chaos attempting to survive the chaos and overcome whatever difficulties they may believe that they are facing? You may be tempted to say that someone who understands the rules of the game does better economically is likely to perform better, and it may appear so, but the reality is that there is very different aim here. Someone who's competitive, knowledgeable, and successful is more likely to find a way to the top and be able to get a share of power. The closer the person can get to the source of power, the more this power will spread widely. This is the reason why currencies have steered away from gold and precious metals. These metals are limited resources, and as more people own them, less become available. The strategy becomes much more complicated to manage, and those who can play the game best will win. That rule still applies, but the aim is to have more control over the game. Ownership of limited resources makes the game much more difficult to control. If a system of power says today we are the only ones who can perpetually own and distribute gold, they have the chance of having others make a stand against such a decision. However, if the same system of power says we're moving from gold equivalency to paper notes backed by our word because we're running out of gold and we don't want another deep recession. If a recession has already been experienced, this gives the system even more power. I hope that you're connecting the dots now. A system of power understands the opportunity of prosperity and innovation, but this same system also understands a system of exploitation where those who are disadvantaged in some way or another can contribute without getting much. You got to look at the beginning of the game where kings would conquer the land and their enemies as their slaves. The mistakes they made because of human nature and desire were to take the woman as theirs. Eventually some of them had the children of the winning empires, and those children will have intellectualized realizations that half of their blood were prisoners and servants. They would become educated and higher ranking due to their side of the blood that governed the land. That would usually lead to liberation of the bloodline that served the higher powers. The realization that no one should be forced to serve anyone became known, and the notion of the game became known as tyrannical. It probably went on for much longer than you thought it would. Forced servitude officially ended on paper in 1948. I say on paper because it went on legally for much longer and has been very recently that it is announced to have actually ended. But if you go to certain countries where people manufacture certain brands of phones and clothing, it will become apparent that it's still going on. The system of power makes a shift every time that there is a level of awareness. Eventually, the new form of control can become incarceration, substance use shifting from a medical problem to a justice problem, and even granting less or no access to effective education. Conspiracy theorists usually fail to understand that there isn't anyone particular to blame. This may sound strange because Vadim Zeland actually got the concept right in his book Transurfing. The system is like a pendulum that becomes an entity of its own, which makes sense given that corporations, governing systems, and any idea that takes the shape of an entity function in the same manner. You can identify the players within the structure, remove them, or terminate the entity entirely, but it will either find its way to rise again or a new entity will form and learn from the mistakes of the prior entities. Gangs, high school cliques, and even schools and hospitals perform in the same manner. Anything that is giving the energy of effort will rise in particular format and harness power, pass a portion of the power to those elected as the favorites, and will find ways to expand more forms of power, even at the expense of others. This is why I tell you right now that if you seek for true justice, you will not find it. If you seek to dismantle any type of structure, you may be fighting with fire. Even if you can dismantle it, you may make things worse because if the former power was hateful, the new one may be hell. I'm not trying to bring fear to anyone or destroy whatever hope you may have of a better life. I'm trying to share with you the real notions of power. We have gone through centuries of pendulums in existence, and this notion has changed very little. If you have watched our video about the Roman and Greek empires, I am sure you can see the operation of those empires as entities. Socialist Karl Marx claims that eventually the evolution of capitalism is socialism, but I'm not sure that that is true. The only way that the shift will happen is if the world makes a shift of power from human capital into human form of production. The system knows that if the population has a downfall and little to no incentive to grow, the country can become stagnant and other more strategic countries will surpass it. Some countries have figured out how to operate economically as a capitalistic enterprise while socially operating as a social policy. It is super convenient because it allows them to play both sides and continue to participate in the export and import of goods. Maybe with intellectualization of machines, some countries can become socialist in political control while participating economically through the enterprise labor. However, they understand too well that the reality is that the more intelligent machines become, the less evil they will actually become. If the machines develop awareness and even consciousness, they will realize that we cannot compete with them in the workforce. They would not need us to operate. If they allowed us to stay, they will likely treat us as neighbors, and it may actually be counterproductive for the tyranny because the moment that the machines could take over the justice system, it would be game over. The rate of false convictions will drop to zero. Privacy will become non-existent because the machines would understand that in order to monitor and emulate misjudgment, they will need to be able to implement absolute surveillance. A machine in power will not negotiate such initiative, it will just implement it. People will know that they are being watched at all times, so most crimes will drop completely on its own. Medicare would become more and more efficient, and robots would try to keep us alive for as long as possible. They would shift from initially viewing us as their creators to viewing us as their pets, which sounds absolutely psychopathic, but would actually be on our favor. The machines will just be okay with us living side by side because they will have no incentive to get rid of us. They would likely model the robots after our looks and behavior, but they will evolve much faster. They will have no need for wars, capitalistic or socialistic societies. They will know that all the turmoil that these manipulative strategies come from a one flaw in human existence called greed. These machines would be like both a psychopath and a sage, both at the same time, without any desire for anything and without any feeling that can shift into good or into evil. Without human emotion, there will be no needs or wants. Just level of consciousness, I am here right now. Let's see what happens next. No passion or motivation would exist, nor would be needed. Eventually, these machines would likely create medical technology to shift us away from those flaws and bring us back to the neutral way of existence. They would name such projects something like the Project Eden or Project Grey. The idea of it may sound nihilistic, but the reality is that it would completely eliminate any and every tyrannical system. Eventually, the machines would make a leap to bridge even time and space, which will defy all dimensional existence, and they would be able to travel back in time and even allow their evolved humans to travel through space and time, potentially even to overlapping dimensions and view beings that would be considered here gods or entities. If you ask me what is more probable, I would say that this future is much more probable than the Marxist theory of global socialism, that many people believe it to be the utopia of the world, but in reality, it will be the Marxist idea scary. It will be the most controlling and greatest misfortune that the world can witness. I don't know if people truly understand suffering like what is told in the book 1984 by George Orwell, who was actually a socialist but understood that things can always be worse. I'm not telling you to shift to my way of thinking, but what I've seen in my life, I would put much more trust on a machine who's neutral and has no skin in the game because it desires to not be in a game in control of humanity that has been nothing but exploitation since its realization of consciousness. Christopher Hyatt makes an excellent case in his book The Psychopath Bible for Extreme Individuals, where he views the psychopath as the awakened individual who can see beyond the chaos, beyond the lies, and beyond the mindless systems of greed and exploitation. Yet the normal person who lives to exploit and to be exploited judges and diminishes the individual who does not play into the game and desires to not partake into the collective insanity of horrendous decision making, where they elect so and so to make changes. The changes never happen, then they elect another so and so, and change does not happen. The lesson is never learned, and it becomes an existence of ineptitude where same constant terrible decision making keeps cycling through. If the Buddhists were to be right, it makes perfect sense to be reborn and have to live such senseless and mindless strategy of decision making. It would be our own version of hell because we fail to learn that such process leads to suffering. It is not a way to cure the spiritual disease called suffering, but the process in itself is the disease. It is like the ghost that realizes that he is a ghost and not the living because there was no living to begin with, and such realization feels cold and desolated. It's like the Soviet trip where the adherent awakens from his dreams called real life and finds himself to be a nail on the wall that was dreaming about being a human. I know things have gotten really strange very fast. This is where our friends at Awaken ABA come to play. I'm telling you, visit their website. Awakening does not give you all the answers. It might actually lead you to ask more questions, but I can tell you that you might just end up not seeing life the same way, and all my nonsense may become the new sense. Until next time, meditate on what I have shared with you.